Yes, Mr. Dasi has confirmed. And General Narasimhan, he should be joining soon.
Okay.
I've messaged all of them and
Ambassador, we'll just give them a minute.
I'm learning how to use this stuff. How to use the
Backdrop.
background.
Backdrop. Yeah. Ambassador Verma, just 2 more minutes. Mr. Panda is connecting and then General Narasimhan is left. So hopefully we should all be able to have a full minute.
Good afternoon, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, sir. I can see you using a virtual background.
Yeah.
Means a place you don't want to show.
I'm so tired of using the CI background
also
and finally I changed it.
Welcome, Mr. Panda. Mr. Panda is also using a virtual backdrop, I see.
Hi,
Good
Jay.
to have you. Frozen screen.
I can't see Jay.
No, his screen is frozen. Yeah, now it is fine. So everybody saying hello to you, Mr. Panda.
Hello everyone. Namaskar.
Hi, Jay. Long time no see.
Yeah.
All of 5 minutes.
Yes, I know.
How are you, Jamshid?
Hi, Vikram.
So Ambassador Verma, thank you so much for agreeing to shift the time, but it was like, it was a hard choice for us trying to choose between our ambassador to Japan and Japan's ambassador to India. So I thank you for adjusting and I'm glad we are able to do this with you. It's been a great session this morning with Ambassador Suzuki. Both Naushad and Mr. Panda were part of that discussion. So we've had a really good morning and delighted to have you with us. I will hand it over to the chair of the dialogue, Mr. Tarun Das, to take over and to conduct the rest of the proceedings. So thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you very much. Ambassador, you're going to be 55 in 2 weeks' time from today, right? And I've already forecast your future in technology.
I do believe
Now,
in.
we need you today to give us a little guidance before we have our meeting with the Japanese side day after tomorrow. Even though it's short notice, you can see that we have a full turnout, except for Mr. Suresh Prabhu, who is not able to join today, but he will be part of the dialogue day after tomorrow. He is, has been one of the regulars, except when he was in the cabinet. And as is Mr. Panda, Jay has been part of this dialogue consistently. And as I was listening to him on the webinar with the Japanese ambassador, I was not sure who is the Japanese ambassador, whether it's Mr. Suzuki or Mr. Panda. He was such an ardent advocate for the bilateral relationship. We missed you last year, and we're sorry for that, but your team, led by your DCM, looked after us very well. And we had a great dialogue, and we actually announced there my successor, because I have been leading this dialogue since 2006. But you know, the Prime Minister had some other plans for my successor. So he's doing an easier job now, tearing his hair out, especially with the northern border and amongst other things. We look to you, I think, for guidance and briefing on Japan during COVID, the economy, the politics, because we always discuss politics in these dialogues, how firm and how secure is Abe-san, who incidentally has always met us when we have been for these dialogues. How do you see the India-Japan situation? I know there are a lot of positives, but what are the problems? We've heard about the negotiations to bring down the bullet train project prices. Is that a problem? But we also hear good things about the Japanese investments, not only in Nimrana, but now in Haryana, in the Jhajjar area. New Japanese companies are coming in there. And Japan and China would be of special interest because we always discuss China. India and Japan, India and China, Japan and China, etc. And a little bit how you see the Japan-US relationship. They seem to have managed Mr. Trump well, but some perspective on that because the Japanese are always very preoccupied with the US relationship. We have two new members, Mr. Naushad Forbes, who's been on the screen. I still don't see General Narasimhan, so I'm not sure whether he has joined or not. And in place of Chandrajit Banerjee, the Director General, we have the Deputy Director General joining us today, Marut Sen Gupta, whom you probably know. So over to you, Ambassador, and thank you again.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to the elder wisdom of the country. First of all, as Kiranji said that there was another webinar with or video conference with the Japanese ambassador in India. This perfectly fits into the Atithi Devo Bhava syndrome of India. He is our Atithi and therefore he has to give the priority, given the priority. I'm very glad to accommodate any other time which is required. So let me start with my briefing, and since COVID was the first thing into the mind, Japan has done fairly well in the COVID. And we have seen a lot of precautions taken by Japanese government and the people, but we have not seen a lot of panic here. Probably the only time when they panicked was the time of Diamond Princess, that cruise ship which was here, and we had to evacuate all the Indian crew members on that ship. We did send back about 122 of them, including three foreign nationals. So the handling of Diamond Princess was highly debated here. And it was generally, I hope it is Chatham House rule.
Yes.
And what got discussed in the public and the government and amongst the diplomatic representatives here, that probably the health minister of that time, he is still the health minister, Mr. Kaku, he could not handle the situation well. After that, there was a renewed panel of experts, and the government only listened to the panel of experts, no political views of wisdom. That was such a relief for Japan and the Japanese people, because everything was evidence-based, everything had a logic, and therefore, all of you know Japan very well, people did follow through. As far as the cases are concerned, in Tokyo for last 4 days, 200 plus cases every day, which is a big news here, because it had gone down. But the medical system is still able to cope very well. It is not still 70% occupied. So as far as the medical system and health system is concerned, they are able to handle the situation well. And therefore, once again, there is no panic at all. As far as the recovery percentage is concerned, now how do I calculate that? The total number of cases is divided into active cases and those cases which are closed. Closed cases are either those people who unfortunately died and those people who have recovered. So amongst the closed cases, if I look at it, India has about 96% of closed cases, declared closed cases, I should say, which have recovered. In Japan, 95% of them have recovered. So, and considering the kind of data collection which Japan does, I would say they are almost at par with us. So that is as far as the COVID is concerned. COVID has various impacts. One impact was political. So in political impact, of course, the health minister came out very poorly, and therefore, from being a favorite of Prime Minister Abe, he has gone down the ladder. The gentleman who has come up is Mr. Nishimura. Nishimura is also the deputy leader of India-Japan friendship group in the parliament, Japanese parliament. He is Minister for Economy, and on the economic renovation front, he is the counterpart of our foreign finance minister. Politically, since it meant also cancellation of Tokyo Olympics, it took a toll on Abe. And Abe had to sort of renew his mission to see that more people do see a reason of the Tokyo Olympic being cancelled. Businesses were not too kind because they had invested a lot of money. And over and above that, the COVID meant that the tourism is suspended, both domestic and international. So things were not doing well, and therefore Abe, though being very strong leader, did suffer a bit in the popular image. Within the party itself, he has not suffered much. Because those people who saw him working closely in tidy up the COVID-19 situation have a lot of respect and regard for him. On the economic front, the consumer confidence or the consumer spending, consumer spending is close to 2009, soon after the global financial crisis, and therefore the consumer goods are not doing well in Japan at all. When it comes to the manufactured goods, wherein the entire supply chain is located in Japan and the market is also located in Japan, those industries have not taken a big hit. But those industries which have supply chain in Japan but dependent on exports have taken a hit. Those manufacturing units which have got supply chain in the region or in China, I'll discuss China more in details later, they have taken a larger hit. So economically, that has been the situation. So what is it the Japanese government has done? They have gone ahead with 20% of GDP announced as the financial stimuli. These financial stimuli are going into the tax breaks to various companies, paying rentals and salaries to people in various companies, particularly in the SME environment. Each SME is able to lay its hands on a couple of millions of yen to tidy up the situation. Each individual is able to also get about 100,000 yen as a compensation due to expected job loss or at least less working hour that they are spending at the work. So this 20% of the GDP is a huge amount as far as Japan is concerned. It comes to close to about $1 trillion. But there is a renewed thinking in the Japanese Parliament, Ministry of Finance, METI, Kante, which is the Prime Minister's office, that it could be raised to 40%. And then you are looking at close to $2 trillion of financial stimuli in Japan. A very small part of that will be spent on bringing the supply chain back to Japan. Here I'm not talking about relocation. All of us know very well, all of you being experts on Japan, that there had been China plus one policy for a long time. It is not today. And therefore now China plus one policy has become more activated. And many companies are diversifying in regions other than China. Again, I'll just warn you, these are not relocation. It is very difficult for them to come out from China lock, stock and barrel and move to another destination. We expect that about 90% of these SMEs who are in China at the moment would come back to Japan and 10% will go to ASEAN. The main basis of this incentive which was decided was based in Japan ASEAN Economic Forum. That's the economic committee between ASEAN and Japan. And there it came that, look, 220 billion yen could be put there. And then the companies could take advantage. Now, considering that there are 30,000 Japanese companies in China, you can understand it's peanuts for the Japanese companies to diversify from China. So the financial impetus is not all that big, but the political statement is big, that we want you to diversify from China. And that is what we should take note of. That now the political establishment in Japan has become courageous enough to give these kinds of statements in public. Socially, things are fine. Japanese had been wearing masks for God knows how many decades. Only the number has gone up. So they are all with masks on the street. There is no coercion for people to wear masks. There is no coercion for people to maintain social distance. But Japanese being Japanese, all of them wear masks and maintain social distance. And they can't remain for more than an hour without sort of sanitizing their hands or washing that with the soap. So socially, it had impact, but it has not changed the Japanese lifestyle much. In the middle somewhere, when the situation was still not very clear scientifically, there was a bit of boycott of those frontline health workers who were working with the COVID patients. Now that situation has been more or less resolved, and they are being given the status of heroes in the society rather than being looked as devils. Overall political situation in Japan, all of us know that Japan is leading to a poll in the normal context. There are two scenarios which are being discussed at the moment. One is that if the final decision is that the Tokyo Olympics 2020, which will be held in 2021, most likely, does not take place, then the election will be probably announced later this year. If the wisdom is that no, Tokyo 2020 should be held in 2021, as it is being stipulated now, then chances are that soon after the Tokyo Olympics are held, the elections could be announced. Abe is still a very strong contender. So as far as the percentage votes are concerned, I do not see Abe getting defeated due to the popular election. But there is another thread doing rounds that Abe himself has got tired after more than 10 years in the job. So, so therefore, if the second part is true, then we are looking at possible politicians who could fill in his shoes. In Japan, as in no other country in the world, there is one ruling party with known 6 factions and with known 6 leaders. They are as good as opposition parties, in fact, to each other. So all these 6 factions, if you analyze, then Hosoda faction, which is from where Abe comes, is still the strongest faction. So my own assessment will be that Abe will have a great say if he decides to go out of Kantei, doesn't want to become prime minister. Then he will have the great say in appointing who becomes the prime minister. One of the factions, which is known as Kishida faction, is very close to Hosoda faction. And therefore, their thinking is quite aligned, and they should be, if Abe decides to leave, and if the person need not be from the Hosoda faction, one of the two, one is Kishida, another is Ishiba, stand good chance. If it is again back to Hosoda faction, then a very young parliamentarian, Nishimura, whose name I took earlier, could be a good front runner. He's very young. He's deputy leader in the Parliamentary Forum with India. For us, he's very accessible. For us, he's willing to talk on the phone, WhatsApp and SMS. So I may be a bit biased, but in case Hosoda faction comes back again, I might put my butt on him. Overall economic situation, I have already talked about it. The number of bankruptcies is on an increase. Our first 3 months, numbers were very small, and then every month the numbers are increasing. I shouldn't say exponentially, but non-linearly in the upward direction. As far as Japan is looking at its strategic cooperation, this was largely the domestic ones, and I should be able to respond to queries and questions if there are any clarifications sought. So on the strategic front, we are seeing a clear shift in Japanese views of the geopolitics of the region. North Korea remains North Korea the neighbor. China is the one which is going down now in the geopolitical importance as far as Japan is concerned. And you can understand this from the point of view of their statement on Hong Kong. They have never come out with any statement so far in their entire statehood which would say China is an evil. But on Hong Kong, they came out very clearly. Not only that, they shaped the G7 conversation on Hong Kong, saying democracies. So Japan is going back on democracies now, and that becomes their key aspect of the geopolitics in the region and probably globally. On the defense side of the strategic issues, I'm seeing a lot of noise now coming, not a lot of noise being created between self-defense versus offensive self-defense, which we would call defense. This has started coming in because of the new defense minister you have, who used to be the foreign minister of Japan. Taro Kono is known to be a hawk. We had seen that in the Indo-Pacific policies of Japan. We have seen it in his interactions with Australia, India, of course, the US, ASEAN. So him I would consider as a hawk. And he says whether we are able to change the constitution or not, Article 9 of the constitution, it really doesn't matter. We have the right to self-defense, which also means offensive self-defense. So if he is able to get sort of a consensus built around this policy, then you are going to look at a different Japan that will produce defense equipments for itself, considering that there is a slight void at the moment due to the US policies in the region. Another strategic aspect is technology. Japan, it seems that is becoming more and more paranoid about its technologies. And I'm not talking about the sensitive technologies, just the technologies. Because it has seen China is stealing a lot of its technologies through the joint ventures which were created in China. So therefore, technology is an issue, and due to which what happened that in the National Security Secretariat here, they call NSS, they created a new vertical, which they call as economic security vertical. Again, although officials are quite accessible as far as India is concerned, NSA himself is very accessible. I met him 3 days back, I'm sorry. So what they do is, from the economic security point of view, it's not only trade, it's not only investment, it's technology as well. It's cyberspace as well, it's space as well. So they have started now looking at technology from the national security perspective. And that's a new change in Japan, which was always ready to go out with this technology to anywhere in the world, establish itself and then produce the tradable commodities and products. Space, Japan is a bit conservative on the space at the moment. Again, the same thing, whether the space is for defense, self-defense, offensive self-defense. So all these technicalities are still doing rounds, but since it is not very much a part of the defense ministry, so you have other ministers who are more conservative as compared to Taro Kono. And therefore, the policy on space is not taking such a hawkish tone, and it is developing just organically. So there is no inorganic S-curve with a fillip which could be seen. On the cyberspace, since cyberspace has become a part of economic security for Japan, a lot of new things are being done. And Huawei and ZTE and everyone is not pronounced as banned, but they have created structures which will ban them. Each technology will need to be scrutinized by this national security body, and they are clear whom to pass, whom not to pass. Though this will be in typical Japanese connotation, this will be advisory given to the industry. But in Japan, all of us understand that if the government gives an advisory to the industry, it is binding on the industry. So therefore, on the 5G technologies, we can see China independent development in Japan. And I'll come to India later, but that will create a lot of opportunities for us. Nuclear, Japan has gone actually retrograde. Now they are talking about dismantling all the nuclear establishments by a certain year. I don't recall, probably 2030 or something. I don't know from where will they, and they also want to go slow on the coal. So I don't know from where will they be able to get their energy. But that debate is not still on. So on the nuclear, I do not see much forward movement at the moment. Now let me come to Japan, India. A few points to recollect. We know that summit was postponed and it still remains postponed. Japan was not very happy that it was postponed at the last moment. We had no choice. The Indian ambassador in Japan was summoned. He was told things which generally an Indian ambassador in Japan should not be told. But they were not happy, in shock. But once that went off, thankfully for us, soon after the postponement of summit came COVID-19. So everything was taken over by COVID-19. And I was spared from more sermons by the elders here. So the first thing that we did in COVID-19, we tried to do something on Avigan. And Avigan, again, a Japanese drug produced by a Chinese company, all kinds of mess. But IPR remains with the Japanese company, Fuji Chemicals. After a lot of push, they wanted to give us some 1,000 doses, I mean, all kinds of stuff. But finally, we managed to get them to agree to allow Indian pharmaceutical company, one of them at the moment, to produce Favipiravir, which is Avigan, in generic form. And after it is produced, it will have market everywhere except for China and Russia, which we are fine with. China is already producing Favipiravir, and at the moment there is no love lost with the Chinese. I can see Lieutenant General Narasimhan there. So we should be okay with that. And Russians are also sort of tied up with that. But as long as we are able to get all other countries other than China and Russia, we should be happy as a pharmaceutical giant. As far as the meetings are concerned, all the meetings which are happening nowadays are virtual. So EM has a meeting with his counterpart, Raksha Mantri had a meeting with his counterpart, CIM / Minister of Railway had a meetings with his counterpart. These are all virtual platforms, but then there will be telephonic conversations as well, including by our Prime Minister. These are the bilateral ones. There were multilateral ones. G20 was there, all these discussions took place. So the connect has not been lost. What I wanted to say here, COVID or no COVID, the connect has not been lost. And to my pleasure, being someone who has a passion for digital technologies, I love seeing Japanese coming to the digital technology. They are so physical people otherwise. They want to meet you even to give you an invitation card. We saw them doing these virtual meetings very often and very well. We were congratulated when Prime Minister did his virtual summit with the Australian Prime Minister Morrison, and that went down in Japan very well. But we don't want to sort of schedule anything now for at the summit level till the time we are able to review the situation a few months later. On the business side, what we are doing is that on India-Japan again, what we are doing is that we have picked up the sectors of interest between the two countries, and every week we have one webinar, which is a sectoral webinar. And initially for the first two webinars, we have done 8 webinars so far. The first 2 webinars, we were able to get about 90 companies, 80 to 90 companies on an average. But when we moved on 3rd to 8th, now we are averaging about 250 companies each webinar. India will have about 80 to 100 companies, and rest will be Japanese. We will only be facilitators. I'll do my usual speech in the beginning, and thereafter it is all technical experts, domain expert-led conversation. However, we have not been able to do so far very well in the one-to-one B2B meeting. We are trying to develop a platform. If we are able to do that, because the businesses need to have kind of confidentiality to discuss, etc. So we're trying to create rooms and see if that could be possible. If that is possible, then we will be doing B2B as well. B2G is doing very well. So what we have been able to do during the COVID period is that we had collated the problems of the Japanese companies in India. And then in each of these webinars, depending on the sectors, we'll get those state governments involved where the Japanese companies are in majority in that sector and have been facing problems. So chief secretaries of those states, the principal secretary industry, environment, if there is an environmental clearance, etc. And some of them were basically requested in a Japanese manner to deliver. I will not name the state governments, that will not be fair on their part. But I'm glad to tell you that in 3 months of coercing, we see the delivery coming through. I have told DPIIT and CII and ASSOCHAM and PhD Chamber of Commerce, all webinars I have done with them. I've just told them, give me 25 happy, good stories. Just 25. I'll get them translated in Japanese. They will be video bites. They will go viral here. In Japan, it's, please pardon me for saying that, it's a tribal society. It's a society of word of mouth. So if Toyota feels happy, if Hitachi feels happy, if Sony feels happy, 1,000 other companies will feel happy automatically. That increases your outreach post-COVID-19. COVID-19 I'm taking only to remain connected, build trust between the two sides so that post-COVID-19 we are actually able to do business. We don't sit down to introduce each other. On the startup front, we are doing one pitching event one virtual pitching event every fortnight. Huge traction, huge traction. And in this particular context, it is not only maintaining contacts, but money is flowing into India. So I'm very delighted on the pitching event. And you mentioned the name of Raj Srivastava, the Deputy Chief of Mission. He is leading this domain. A lot of good work is being done in the startup domain. And Japanese are very much interested in co-creating and co-producing with India in the startup. As far as our community is concerned, NRIs are safe here. Initially, there was a panic for them to go back to India. Now, most of them would like to stay back in India. I need not explain that. Trade has declined, which is predictable because the last quarter did not do much business. So our total trade volume has declined by 4%, bilateral total trade volume. Our exports have declined by 7%. Japanese exports to India has declined by 3%. Challenges will be huge in upscaling these anytime sooner because the Japanese economy is also not doing well. And if the Japanese economy is not doing well, consumer spending is not going beyond a certain level, it will be difficult for us to supply. Except for those products which are required as industrial intermediates. And for those products, the larger market is Japan than exports. Because Japanese economy will come up much faster than the economy of the region and the global economy. The kind of stimuli that they are giving and the kind of deep pockets that they have. For Japan, as far as I'm concerned, my main focus is investment, not so much trade. Trade is largely a facilitation issue for me. So certification, standards. I'm glad to tell you, by the way, that in the textile sector, we have been able to get Nisai in India, which is the most famous standards and certification agency of Japan. What it will do is that it will improve our own qualities, and once it certifies, Japan automatically becomes a market for us. I'm trying to get in the food sector as well, such agencies in India, in marine sector, such agencies in India, so that they are able to certify the Indian products, which could be easily then be imported into Japan. That will be the facilitation side that we are doing. On the railways, since Dr. Das mentioned earlier about MAHSR. So MAHSR is going slow, and let's be very frank. It's going slow, it is missing many deadlines. The 10 bids are not being opened, bids are being postponed. So all kinds of stuffs are happening. But the core issue is the cost. So cost is being discussed virtually at all levels. And I shouldn't say that we should see a breakthrough in that, but the convergence is higher than what used to be 3 months back. I will leave it at that. So we thought, what else we can do? So we went into other railway technology. So today we are looking at giving approvals to the types in cushion braking, in air brakes, in this metro handhelds. So we are looking at other railways technologies in which Japan is quite advanced. And I'm very glad to share with you that very recently, about a couple of days back, the Japanese company and its offshoot in India, which is ABB, got a huge order for the traction motors and transformers in the Indian railways. And the Japanese are very happy at that. Soft power part, since our cultural center is closed due to the social distancing to be maintained, we have been able to push out close to 200 plus videos in Japanese on yoga, on dances and music. And we do hold classes virtually. And we find a lot of traction on that. People are very happy. On the multilateral platform, G20 I just mentioned, and we are seeing a lot of things happening there. Japan, China, Hong Kong I mentioned, South China Sea is another one where the number of incursions have increased manyfold. And the Chinese naval ships and coast guards, both of them are sea. Coast Guard ship was actually stayed there for a longer time. And they said that they are just administering the Chinese fishing vessels, which is all bunkum, all of us know very well. They are doing the rock diplomacy there. So Japan is not too happy with China from the geopolitical aspect, and I did explain it earlier. As far as India-China is concerned, we saw a statement coming out from Japan, which was much favorable to India as compared to what they would do otherwise. So they did not balance. They say status quo should be maintained. And that had been our policy also. That the status quo until May 4th has to be returned. So therefore we saw Japan coming out a bit strongly this time, and they have clearly supported our position with China and not trying to balance. So that is a big political indication as to what is the thinking in the Japanese establishment. Japan DPRK, as worse as ever, there is no confidence at all between the two of them. So I do not see things coming back to normal. But Taro Kono will be happy as long as this tension continues. He might be able to push through an offensive self-defense policy due to DPRK and not so much due to China or any other country. Japan-US relations, it's pretty below normal. Publicly, all politicians will say, it's a great relationship, and President Trump, he holds us in big respect and everything. But when you really talk to them, heart-to-heart talks, they will say, look, there is no predictability. Their bases are not operating optimally in this region. They did not do anything to patch up between Japan and South Korea. So there are sort of cluster of issues which they see the challenging situations between Japan and US. As far as the election results are concerned in the US, so far they have not mentioned anything. And they say, I mean, Trump, even though he was a Republican, but he has not done much in the region. And therefore, even if Biden comes, what else can happen? So the US elections outcome, they're just, my own assessment is they will go. So I'll stop here, sir. I've spoken a lot. I'll stop. And then if you think I'll be capable of responding to any of your queries, I'll stand by.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was very comprehensive and very helpful. And while you were speaking, you would have noticed that your other Mandarin-speaking person has also joined, General Narasimhan. So now we have 2 Mandarin-speaking people. I don't know when you're going to get posted in China. I have to turn to Mr. J. Panda first, because you mentioned the name Nishimura, and he is, of course, somebody we have been meeting regularly, but I know he's a very close personal friend for many, many years of Jay. So I'll just ask him to make a comment and put a question. And then Jamshed Godrej had a comment and a question about manufacturing and energy. So I'll turn to him and then open it out. Jay, has he gone off, Kiran?
He did log, he got kicked off, I think, but he's back. Mr. Panda, can you hear us?
Yes,
the
I'm back.
question was for you, Mr. Das. May want to ask a question unless Mr. Panda heard it already.
I didn't hear it.
You heard the comment about Mr. Nishimura, who you and he go back a very long time. So this would have been music to your ears. So I just wondered whether you have a comment or a question.
I do, yes. I was very pleased to hear Ambassador's comments about Nishimura-san, whom I've known closely for 2 decades. He's been home many times, and I'm glad to hear that the potential we've always seen in him seems to be coming to fruition. My question to Ambassador is, has there been any specific intimidation on the economic front by China to Japan, like they've done with Australia, like they've done with UK? I don't mean just the patrolling by the Coast Guard and the Navy, any specific economic threat of sanctions, for example, because I understand Japan has put up a fund to help de-risk Japanese companies to move away from China. So any counter to that?
Shall we take, Ambassador, shall we take Jamshed Godrej and maybe one more and then come back to you so that you just collect the questions. Jamshed?
Thank you, Tarun, and good to see you, Ambassador. I have 2 comments. One is that, post Fukushima, Japan's energy needs have been met by import of LNG and coal. And I think there's a lot of concern that a country that had prided itself on its renewable sort of environment safety standards, etc., and has not gone into renewables to the extent that one would have liked to see. And as you know, in India, the solar mission has really pushed us quite well ahead. And a very recent tender, which was both solar plus energy storage combined, has now come in for bidding at a price which is lower than the cost of putting up a new coal-based plant. And so I'm just wondering whether we can have greater cooperation and between Japan and India in this space, because it would be beneficial both for India from an investment point of view and for Japan from learning from the Indian experience. And I remember some years ago when a former prime minister had talked about cool biz and getting everybody to get out of their suits and ties. And I think Japan has been quite a model for us for energy efficiency and generally on things green. So I'm just hoping that maybe that's an agenda we can push. And the other point is that CII has worked very closely with JICA on manufacturing, and we had the privilege of having Professor Shiba with us. The government of India has also honored Professor Shiba, and this is an area of manufacturing competitiveness which we are not doing enough on in India. And we need to move forward in a much deeper way. And that how we can do that together with Japan would be useful. Thank you.
One last person, Vikram, would you like to come in?
Just listening right now, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's go back.
The only comment I have is on energy, which is what I understand is that they're looking at next 20-year plan is more on hydrogen, is what I understand. A source of hydrogen is another story, import of hydrogen and things like that. But I think the focus seems to be more on hydrogen in Japan across the board. And the second comment I have is on what I heard about Mr. Abe is, this is a wild story that he'll replace Mr. Omi in STS next year. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But that's the story from the STS side.
Back to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. So let me start with this. If there was any specific intimidation by the Chinese on the, they are so closely linked economically that Chinese would also think twice. So no, there had been no specific intimidation. What they said, Chinese, that you tell us what is the problem, why do you want to move out your industry, and we will set it right. It was more in terms of facilitation than intimidation. But when you look at the marine resources, fisheries in particular, there were intimidations as well, but not general trading or manufacturing establishment. Chinese would hate to see Japanese companies go. And Chinese depend a lot on the incremental investment that the Japanese make. What is happening is that the base investment still remains in China, but incremental investments are moving to Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia. That is what Chinese hate to see. But so far, no intimidation at all. On the renewable side, I will look at from two perspectives. One is the policy perspective, another is the technology perspective. On the policy perspective, Japan does not have enough number of sunny days to get into solar. They can demonstrate the technology, but it may not be commercially viable for them. Though if you take the Shinkansen from, say, Tokyo and go to south, the more south you go, the larger solar farms you will see. But still, they are not as big or huge as we have in India. From the technology perspective, they have developed good solar technologies. They have developed good storage technologies. So at the moment, they are using it for the EVs. And what came out later from Mr. Kirloskar, they are looking at hydrogen economy for Japan. And it was made very clear in the last G20 meeting, they had a separate session on hydrogen economy. I have been to Toyota and I boarded a bus which was run on hydrogen. I drove a car which was run on hydrogen. It was seamless. Problem is storage and transportation, on which they are making further developments grow. Here I can see, when I was talking to the state government of Kerala, for example, they produce a huge amount of hydrogen and they go waste. Only if we are able to capture that hydrogen using the Japanese technology, we'll be able to store the hydrogen for future use, whichever use we want to put it. Whether it is the locomotive, which is the larger thing, or we want to run the city buses, as we have done with the CNG, etc. So that is a possibility of collaboration there. So I would rather go on the technology side than the policy side. Policy side, only hydrogen, not solar. and on the technology side, both solar and hydrogen. As far as the manufacturing competitiveness is concerned, sir, we have set up a platform between DPIIT and METI of Japan. First 2 meetings have already taken place on enhancing India's manufacturing competitiveness. And a lot of suggestions are thrown by the Japanese side. I think we are taking more time to digest, but I'm sure whenever we are ready, we should be able to take it forward. Japanese are basically telling us what used to be their policy in raising their competitiveness, and in the present context, if they have technologies and other best practices in the present context, which could be shared with India. So that is largely the platform where we are, and I hope that some of our industries will take advantage of that. The initial industries were steel industry, chemical industry, and anything to do with environment. So these were the 3 initial things for uplifting our competitiveness based on the Japanese experience. I hope I have been able to respond to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me shift to Pramit and General Narasimhan to come in on the more strategic side. I see General Narasimhan's hands up, so I'll go to him first and then I'll come to you, Pramit. General? Are you on mute?
Yeah, you're on mute, General. Yeah.
It's on mute now. Nice to see you, Mr. Ambassador, after leaving Delhi. I have 2 questions. I don't know whether you covered it in the brief period in which I was not on the meeting. One is on the AAGC. Where are we and how are we looking at the Asia growth corridor? That is one. And the second thing that I'm looking at is the way China and Japan are handling the East China Sea issue. We see a trend of Chinese actually buzzing the Japanese waters and others a little more than normal. But how do you see it from there, and what do they feel about it?
Pramit?
Yeah, I have just 3 sort of quick questions. One, RCEP, I believe we're still under pressure from the Japanese on that front. Are they getting, my understanding is we're sending a strong message, we're not really interested. I'm curious where that's going. Second, the Japanese have been part of these discussions we've been having with the Americans about this plans to disrupt supply chains or move them away from China in pharma, for example, aerospace and so on. What do the Japanese think about this? Is this feasible? And third, just a quick one, when I've talked to Japanese recently, there's a growing interest in some sort of strategic cooperation with Britain. Britain is interested in joining the CPTPP. There's talk in the British press that Britain will put its single aircraft carrier in the Pacific Ocean, possibly based in Japan, and otherwise positioning themselves as an Indo-Pacific player. And I'd be curious to know what you're hearing on that front.
Back to you, Ambassador, and then I'll go quickly to Naushad, and if Marut has anything to ask.
Thank you very much, sir. On General Narasimhan, on AAGC, I won't expect much to happen till the time COVID-19 situation subsides. Even when it was no COVID, we were not moving much ahead of that. The reason is probably we are not having honest conversation. And the honest conversation would be that in Africa, in most of the countries, India has a primacy. Why should we get Japanese in? For Japanese, they are leaders in automotive industry there. Why should they get Indians on? So main thing is that we have to be very honest and sincere in our conversation as B2B. Government can only create a basis. Finally, the business will be done by business. So on B2B, we have to be very honest with each other as to what is going to be the ROI, what is going to be in it for us. If we create a hospital, will the hospital leverage our social image to do further business? So all these things will need to be discussed. And so far we have been less than honest, both sides with each other. And therefore, I do not see it going much further at the moment. On the East China Sea, you are very right, the number of incursions has increased and increased manyfold, in fact. The number of days for which any particular Chinese ship on an average would stay at a particular point in the East China Sea international water or the Japanese waters, that has also got elongated. They are there. Now they are saying that they are administering the navigation of their own fishing vessels in the waters, and therefore their Coast Guard ship needs to be present there. So there is a lot of disquiet. And that is why you see Taro Kono coming the way in which he is coming. Though he will say everything on the DPRK, because China is too big for Japan to take on. But actually, that is what he means. That I need to have a deterrence, at least to show off to China. That look, let's discuss it. Let's not go further. As far as Japan-China dialogues are concerned, they are going on. And I don't know whether you would have noticed that the tone has changed. I'll not be able to give you the full details of my meeting with Mr. Kishida, who is the policy chief. But soon after my meeting with him was the party meeting. And the party was divided. So one of the main China backers in the party, you take the name, he said that, look, the visit can be postponed, the Chinese president's visit, Xi Jinping's visit. And there was another part of the party led by Kishida, says, no, it has to be cancelled. And for the first time in the history of Foreign Relations Committee of the LDP, the resolution which has been sent to the government from the party says that the visit should be cancelled. It's a big message. And I'll not be able to elaborate much. General Simar, you would pardon me for that. But this is a political message which has gone in, and this was covered in the media. Then Pramiji, about the RCEP, in no uncertain terms, we have told Japanese on a number of occasions at various levels that the present context of RCEP is not suitable for India. And therefore, we will not be able to participate formally or informally. Because one of the Vietnamese chair had suggested that for first 5 years, India can participate informally without committing anything. But we have made it clear that, it will be difficult for us. But if we know how the situation, how the things work in this part of the world, there will be some more approaches made. And then finally it will take another 5 to 6 months time to sort of put a lid on this, and then we'll through. As far as supply chain disruptions are concerned, all the countries have felt it. Not only India, not only US, Japan has felt it hugely, in fact.
No, I wasn't talking about disruptions. I was talking about the proposals that Steve Biegun had made to Harsh Shringla and to the Quad Plus countries about a post-pandemic supply chain cooperation that minimized or marginalized China's.
That's still very much in the strategic thinking domain. Reason is very simple, that you cannot diversify your supply chain in a year or two. It takes time. But yes, strategically, from the policy point of view, the thinking is allowed to go China plus one more vigorously than it was done earlier. So if you see from last year till today, about 56 large Japanese companies have decided not to incrementally invest in China and go to Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. And 4 of them came to India since last year. So, so the thing is that China plus one policy will become more pushed now by the government as well. And therefore, through that, we will see a supply chain reorganization. I will not say they will get out of China, China is a huge domestic market whenever the domestic market is ready to be explored, but it is a huge domestic market and no company will leave that market. But any incremental investment, any incremental activity will come to countries other than China. That is more or less ensured. As far as the UK's interest in a strategic partnership is concerned, both sides are equally interested. UK is interested, Japan is interested. They have been they have had parleys on this, and we may see the strategic convergence, particularly in the case of Indo-Pacific with Japan, as far as the UK is concerned. Thank you.
Naushad?
So I know we're completely out of time. So I'm just going to point actually to Maruth and ask him to mention a really good CII report that we've just put together on India-Japanese relations and how we can both increase Japanese investment in India and build supply chains that Indian firms can participate in, led by Japanese firms. So I think maybe Maruth, you could mention that.
Thank you, Naushad. Ambassador, just two quick points. One is taking off from what Naushad mentioned. I'll mail this to you today. We've just put together a report. You mentioned that the focus is largely on investments, and on the trade side, it's largely facilitation that is being looked at by the embassy. And our report actually talks about three things. One is about how to get investments from Japan to India, specifically identifying certain states where you said the success cases are of Japan. Number one. Number two, looking at how India could be a sourcing destination for various products for Japanese use. So which of course is trade related. And the third is combining the two, is looking at the global value chains that pass through Japan and how India can be a part of that. This also kind of relates to what you mentioned in terms of the diversification of investments that the Japanese are looking at. So that was one point. I'll send you the report today and perhaps we can have your views in terms of how we could action some of the points that you mentioned. The two quick points. One is you mentioned that the summit level meeting is not envisaged in the near future. So we have, as you know, the India-Japan Business Leaders Forum. But could we actually have the IGBLF meet virtually disconnected from the summit meeting so that the business level discussion continues and that does not get interrupted? And the third thing you mentioned, Ambassador, there's a certain degree of paranoia in Japan about the advances that China is making on technology. Just a related quick question. Seeing the development of AI and Industry 4.0 in Japan. Because that is an area where CII is starting to work quite a bit with Germany and a few other countries, but Japan could probably be leading this and we don't know adequately. So just your thought.
Thank you very much. Now let me take Mr. Sangeeta, investments. First of all, we have to understand how do Japanese do investment. We have to understand this very clearly. Japanese do not do investment company by company. Japanese do investment cluster by cluster. So if you are able to get Hitachi, if you are able to get Nissan, the vendor base of Nissan will come with Nissan. So our main strategy in investment should be to quote these large companies, and there are not more than 100 of them. Most of them are already present in India. But unfortunately, due to unfocused approach that we have in facilitation in particular sense, we are unable to earn the brownie points from these large companies, which are as large as many governments in the world. We always see them, I'm sorry, most of you are business people. We always see them, government should keep the businesses at arm's length. What happens in Japan? In Japan, government is business and business is government. So we have to be very careful in understanding how do Japanese companies make investment. They go by cluster. So pick up the right players in the cluster. Everyone else will come with you. 1. 2, Japan is, as I earlier said, pardon me for saying that again, it's a tribal society. It's a word of mouth society. If you cannot generate good stories on Japanese investments in India, you have lost the ground. No one will look at you. We keep saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Panda, I have to say this. I know I'm politically incorrect, but this is a Chatham House rule. I thought I should mention it. We keep saying that we have a huge domestic market. What is the spending capacity in India? What huge market are we talking about? A seller will look at how much profit is he making per item. So therefore, we should moderate ourselves in understanding this situation. So Japanese companies who will come to India will largely come for the domestic market, except for AI and cyber and other things, which I'll explain a little later. So so first was investment, and your next two things were related to somehow the supply chain. Now, supply chain, first thing we have to remember, are we able to give the quality? If you look from the Japanese quality perspective, I'm sorry, we are not. And therefore, till the time we scale up to the Japanese quality, Japanese companies will not be interested in us. So that is why the suggestion which I gave right in the beginning, can we get the Japanese certification and standardization agencies to India? Even if the government pays the entire setup cost, let's get them. Once they certify that your mango is worth Japanese quality, your mango will sell in Japan. Once they say that your carp fish is able to sell in Japan, quality is right, it will sell in Japan. Once they say that your carburetor will be able to fit into Hitachi according to their specification standards, it will sell in Japan. So that's why I always mention facilitation issue. If we as a whole are able to facilitate, industry will benefit from it. So far I have got only one success, which had been sending Japanese textile certification and standards agency to India to set up a unit with the private sector. I know in the bureaucracy they will get lost. And once again, I'm politically incorrect, General is there, but I thought I'll speak my mind out, being a representative of the country here, of government and the people both. So I'm very clear that till the time you do not match up to the standards, you will not sell. Just imagine today Vietnam is able to produce better goods than India. And therefore Vietnam is a larger part of the Japanese supply chain than India. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, cyber, information technology, of course, there is no denying the fact that India is the leader. And that you can see from the point of view that Rakuten has the largest design establishment in India, in the world. Hitachi has the largest design setup in India for the global design. Rakuten is for the Japanese design. NEC has its largest design and development center in India. So we have to take these guys in and ask them, look, are you comfortable? Are you getting your bread and butter? Are you getting your water? Are you getting your electricity? When they are happy, they will bring companies in with them. So as far as the IJBLF is concerned, by all means, please go virtual, because I really cannot commit to you when the summit will be held. All means, and finally, what is the product of IJBLF? We learn about the difficulties which both sides face in each other country, either as a market access issue, or as a certification issue, or as a PBT issue, or as the PSP issues. So we want to be very clear when the two prime ministers sit for the summit about the recommendations from you. What happens generally is that IJBLF's recommendation comes an evening before. You really think that if there is a new item, the systems will be able to take care of that? They will not. So ideally speaking, IJBLF should always be midterm between two summits. So please go ahead, you will have my full support. I will do the marketing here, so nothing to worry, and we'll take it forward. but please focus a lot on AI and Industry 4.0. Have a word with NASSCOM, though they are a different organization, but they're an organization in India. They are doing wonderfully well in this sector in Japan. Please have a meeting with them. Please sort of scratch their mind and see what the industry can do. I hope I was able to explain. Thank you very much, sir.
Ambassador, thank you so much. We are absolutely overwhelmed by the sharing of knowledge and information that you have done in the last 1 hour and 5 minutes. I think they've been very worthwhile. I'm so glad, Kiran, that you and Harshit reached out to the ambassador for his time at short notice. This will help us a great deal in our meeting with Kasai-san and his team, and we will give you feedback after that meeting. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you, everybody. So,
thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.